I'm going to be showing you how you can use Windows PowerShell to create user accounts in Active Directory. Now, the first thing you need to understand is that you need to be logged into a domain controller or on a computer that has RSAT installed. RSAT is a Windows feature set and can be easily installed if you don't have it. However, if you log directly into a domain controller, all of your prerequisites will be met. So I'm on my domain controller right now, so all I need to do is on Windows Server, click Tools. We're going to go down until we see the PowerShell ISE. No reason to click the x86. We're going to use the 64-bit version, which is the default. So Windows PowerShell ISE. I'll click on this. And this is a screen that we see. The first thing we need to do is click this script dropdown. Now here, this works a bit like command prompt. So you can type in commands like ipconfig and stuff like that. But if you want to write a script that you can save, you want to click this dropdown. And now we can write a series of commands and save them and execute them and edit it and so forth. So the first thing we need to do is learn how to write a comment. The way you do that is by hitting the Shift and the number 3. Now, the reason for comments is to help you understand code, and it's going to be very helpful when you come back 3 months from now and you need to make a change to the code you're writing. Always use comments and always explain what you're trying to do. The first thing that we're going to try and do is store the user's first name into a variable. So we're going to type that in, store user's first name into variable. Okay, so we've just written a line of code that will not be executed, but it's information for us, the people who are viewing the code, so that we can understand what our goal is. Now, to create a variable, we hold the Shift and then press the 4 key. This puts a $sign out, okay? And then we're going to type in the name of the variable. We're going to call this first name. So we now have a variable and we need to set it to some type of value. And we could just type in equals and then in quotation marks, we could say Mark, or we could say, John, whatever we want. Or better than that, we could get the user's input. So we could prompt the user at this point and say, what's your first name? They can type it in and then it will be stored in the variable. So let's do that. The way we can do that is with the read-host command. So if we type in read-host and we have first name, what's going to happen is the user is going to be asked to put in some kind of input, and they're going to hopefully type in their first name. But it's not going to be very apparent because there's no prompt telling them what to do. We can add a prompt by hitting space and then pressing the dash to add an argument. And we can see there the first option is prompt. So if we hit space and then in quotation marks, we need to type in some kind of prompt. So we're going to say, please enter your first name, and then in quotation marks. Now let's see what happens when we run this script. I'm going to hit play. And we can see here, this is the line of code that we're executing. This will be the whole script. And what we see is please enter your first name. So if we type in my first name, which is Paul, press enter, the script ends and nothing happens because we're not doing anything after that. We're just grabbing the input and storing it into this variable, and then that's it. So let's do something with that information. The goal of this line is to output the user's information. Okay, so we're going to put that in comments. So that is our goal. And the way we're going to do that is with the echo command. We're going to say echo, and then we're going to output some kind of line. And what I'm going to type in is your first name is, and then we're going to enter the variable. Your first name is blank. And what this first name variable is going to fill in the blank because we're reading the line up here. So I'm going to hit the play button and it says, please enter your first name. So we're typing in Paul. So now we're at this line right here in the code. Once I press enter, Paul will be stored into first name. And then on the next line, it's going to echo whatever was stored in this first name. So it says, please enter your first name. And now it says, your first name is Paul. And I don't know why I didn't put a space there. Let me fix that. Now we can use this variable over and over and over again. So if we want to continue on with this, we could type in first name is a very cool guy. First name is a bit strange. Okay, just having some fun just to help you understand it. So if we hit play again, we can say, please enter your first name. So I'm going to type in Paul. And now we can see at the bottom of this input, it says your first name is Paul. Paul is a very cool guy. Paul is a bit strange. And you can see we can type in any name that we want. So if I type in James, it now says your first name is James. James is a very cool guy. James is a bit strange. You could type in Mark, anything you want. Since it's being stored in this variable first name, anytime we use that first name, it's going to pull up what was put into the read host command and stored in the variable. All right. Now that you understand how to take the first name, how do you think we would take in the last name and potentially a password if we wanted to create a password for a user. It'd be the exact same way. We need to create a variable and we'll call it last name. And it'll be the exact same pattern. So read host, prompt. And the way I'm typing these commands so fast is just by hitting the tab button to do tab completion. So if I type in read dash, and then it auto-populates. I can hit the up and down arrow and select one of these and then press the tab key and it completes it for me. And when I hit space and the dash button again, I have all these options I can choose from. And if I start to type prompt, you can see that it narrows the list down and I just need to press tab and now I can enter the prompt. So we're going to say, please enter your last name. So let's edit this little string here, this output. And let's update it with the last name that we have now. So we're just going to add the variable last name there. We need to change this to full name since we're now getting the full name. Your full name is first name, last name. Let's see what happens. Hit play. Your first name, Paul. My last name is Hill. So now it says your full name is Paul Hill. Okay, so I think you're understanding how this works now. Now to move on, let's learn about how we can create a user account by using this in Active Directory. The first thing we want to do is collect some type of password. So again, we're going to do the exact same process. And it's going to be read-host, prompt, and we're going to say, please enter your password. All right. And we'll add that into here. Your password is, and then we're going to say password. Okay, cool. Just run this again. Make sure we don't have any errors. My name is Paul Hill. Okay, so my password is test, and then password in lowercase and with a 0 and with an exclamation mark, and I'm just going to press enter. Your full name is Paul Hill. Your password is test password exclamation mark. So now that we know how to collect the first name and the last name and a password of a user, what we need to do is pass that information on to Active Directory. To do this, the first thing we're going to need to do is import a module. So we're going to make a comment here and say import required modules. And the command that we're going to need to use is import-module, and it's called Active Directory. All right, and that's all we need to do for that. Now we have the Active Directory module. Now, if you're not on a domain controller or you don't have RSAT installed, you're going to get an error at this point. Okay, so we'll just run the code and make sure we don't get an error. Paul Hill test password. Okay, I spelled that wrong. That's fine. Your full name is Paul Hill. Your password is test password. No errors, and that's because I'm on a domain controller. What we need to do now is find out where do we want to store the user in Active Directory, because if we just try to create the account, it's not going to know where to store it, and we're not going to be able to successfully create a user account. Specifying the desired OU is a required argument for the command. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's create a new comment, and we're going to say specify where to store the user account. And we're going to make a new variable, and we're going to call it OU path equals. And then we're going to have an open quotation mark. We're not going to make this a read host. And the reason for that is that the OU path is not very easy to type in, and it's really easy to mess up on. So we're going to set this to a variable that's not really going to change unless you want to change it yourself in the code. Now here's how you find the OU path. It's not as simple. It's not like a file structure where it'd be like C drive / test / IT flee or something like that. It's actually more complicated. So what we're going to do is open Server Manager, and then we're going to pop into Active Directory. So I'm going to select Tools, go up to the top here, Active Directory Users and Computers. Now we need to turn on the Advanced View. So what I'm going to do is click View in Advanced Features. So we'll click this drop down. I'm going to create a new organizational unit for the PowerShell users. I'm going to uncheck it from Protect from Accidental Deletion. And we'll call this PowerShell Users. And we'll click OK. Now to find the path to this OU, we need to right click on it and choose Properties. And go into the Attribute Editor. And down here on the near the top of the attributes, you can see there is the distinguished name. If we double click on this distinguished name, this is the path that we need to specify in the PowerShell script. Okay? It kind of works backwards. It starts with com, then itflee dot, then PowerShell users. So it kind of goes from right to left and what you would expect. If I create a new organizational unit underneath this, just for demonstration purposes, I'll uncheck protect and we'll call this test OU. If I look at the attributes of this, we'll see that it's again going from right to left. So com IT fleet dot PowerShell users and then test. So the deeper you go, the further it is on the left. So we'll cancel out of this and I'm just going to delete this organizational unit. And we're going to go back to PowerShell users and under the attribute editor, I'm going to double click on the distinguished name. Now we're going to copy this value. So select the whole thing and just copy it and hit OK, then hit cancel and we'll minimize Active Directory. You can leave that open because we'll be coming back to it later. Now under OU path, we're just going to paste this path in there and we'll click in quotation marks. Now I think by looking at this, you can see why I wouldn't want you to type this in yourself. It's a little bit confusing. All right. So the next thing we need to do is secure the password. You can't just hand a variable into Active Directory and expect it to process it. It needs to be secure. But to do that, it's very, very simple. All we need to do is create a new password and call it secure password. And that is going to be equal to convert to dash secure string. And the string that we're going to be converting is password, the one that we're specifying up here by the read host. And then we're going to say as plain text and force. This will make sure that it goes through without any issues. Again, we need to add a comment up here and say convert the password to a secure string. If it's not a secure string, it will not work. You'll get an error. At this point, we're ready to create the user account. Now to do this, we're going to use the new-ad user command. Now this command has a bunch of arguments that we're going to need to specify. And to start, we're going to specify the name. And that is going to be, in quotation marks, first name, and then last name. Okay, so we're doing quotation marks and then the variable first name, space, and the variable last name. All right, this is a required field. Next, we need to do the same thing over, which is a little bit silly, but it's the given name, which is going to be the first name. And we need to specify the surname, which is going to be the last name. It's kind of silly because we have to do the same thing twice, but that's just the way it is. What we need to specify now is the username that we're going to log in with. And that is specified with the argument user principal name. And this is going to be a combination of the first name dot last name because we haven't asked them to type in their desired username. We're just going to make it based off what their first name and last name is. So first name dot last name in quotation marks. Make sure you put in the quotation marks because we're combining two variables. Okay. All right. Now we need to specify the path or where the user account should be created. So to do that, I'm just going to say OU path because we already figured that out right here. So we'll just use that variable. And I'll scroll over here a little bit. Now we need to specify the account password. So to do that, just type in dash account password and make sure you do not use password because that is not a secure string. So we're going to want to use secure password. Okay. And that again, if you remember, is the variable that we set right here. Secure password, convert to secure string password. Okay. So we're using the secure password variable. And now we have two true or false settings that we need to set. The first is change password at logon. And we want to set this to true. So we're going to say $true. The reason why you want to set this is that if you're using a standardized password for every account that you create, like maybe you make all the accounts password one or something silly like that, and you're using a first.last name username or a very standardized username system, which a lot of companies do, you don't want people using the same password you create their account with. And people will do it if you don't force a password change. So it wouldn't be hard for, an employee who got fired to come back and, maybe they see on someone's Facebook that, hey, I got hired by company A, Y, A, B, C, whatever. It wouldn't be that hard for them to come back, go to their computer, type in their first name, last name, and then that standardized password that you're handing out to everyone and get logged into the system. So make sure that you force people to change their passwords. The next thing we need to specify is whether or not the account is enabled. And we do that by hitting dash enabled. And we're going to set this to true. And we need to specifically say I want this account to be enabled, and that will make it available immediately after the account has been created in PowerShell. All right, so we're ready to go. Let's hit the run script or press the F5 button. And now we're asked to enter our first name. We're going to type in Paul. Actually, I need to type in something different because paul.hill is already in use. So we're just going to call it John Jones. John Jones, why not? And now we need to type in a password. Now the password still has to meet Active Directory's complexity requirements. So you can't just type in something like test, all lowercase or anything like that. I think it's something like 1 uppercase, 1 lowercase, 1 number, and 1 special. So I'm just going to type test and then in lowercase password with a 0, RD, and an exclamation mark. So I have my at least 1 uppercase, I have at least 1 lowercase, I have at least 1 number, and at least 1 special character. So now let's press enter and see what happens. So your full name is John Jones, your password is test password, blah, blah. And that's really not a good idea to output in clear text, so you would want to get rid of that echo line, especially for the password. So let's go back to Active Directory, and let's hit F5, and we can see that John Jones has been created. Now if we go under account, we can see that the user logon name is john.jones, and if we go under general, we can see the first name is John, last name is Jones, etc. So now we have created this account. Let me show you, for example, if you try to create it with no information. So if I just press enter through all of these and password, we're going to get an error saying, the string's an empty string, blah, blah. It's not working. So